Unassuming and straightforward, Nnewi Anambra-born lawyer Kene Ilochonwu is an extraordinary Nigerian who has made giant strides in Canada. He made global headlines late last year when he attained the feat never achieved by any black man. The legal counsel with Parkland Corporation broke 113 years jinx by becoming the first black bencher at Law Society of Alberta Province in Canada. He was sworn in on February 25, 2021. Speaking on his rise to the top, Kene said in a recent media interview, "I grew up in Nigeria. I was born in Onitsha and moved to Lagos when I was 6 years old. I attended high school at Federal Government College of Ogbomoso. I come from humble beginnings. I do not take anything in life as it is on merit. A lot of times it is luck, being at the right place at the right time, or just meeting the right people to help you. My dad was an industrialist and businessman, but I wasn't cut out for that. I was more interested in attending school and gaining higher education, which is why I went to live with my uncle in Lagos at 6 years old." He added, "My uncle trained me from when I was 6 until when I left the country. My uncle had returned to Nigeria from Zambia with his family, and he had told my parents that he could take me with him to Lagos because he had a son who was 2 months younger than me. I then became a second son to him, and he trained me from the time I was 6 up to my master's degree, which he paid for, and that was part of the luck I had as well. So I didn't have a scholarship or anything. I was lucky my uncle was there for me and did everything." Still telling his life story, Kene said, "I have lived in 3 worlds, Nigeria, Scotland, and Canada. It was by accident, totally by accident. Moving to Scotland was when MTN and Econet came out in Nigeria. And being a lawyer, I said it would be good to do telecoms law so that I would work in MTN or Econet. So there were only 2 universities that offered communications law, the University of Strathclyde in Scotland and the Queen Mary University of London. Queen Mary University was about £10,000, while Strathclyde was £7,700. So I said I would go for the cheaper option so that I could convince my uncle to pay for the tuition fees. So while I was in Strathclyde, I had traveled to Canada on a visit to a friend, Ako Ufodike. During the visit, he asked me about exploring moving to Canada. This was in 2003 or 2004. The Canadian economy was expanding. The Canadian government had a good and proactive immigration system. Getting a permanent residency in the UK would have taken me like 7 years. But applying for permanent residency to Canada was a more straightforward and shorter route. So I said, why stay in the UK and struggle for permanent residency, struggle for citizenship when I can go to Canada? In 2004, I applied for my permanent residency in Canada and received it in 2006. So again, it wasn't a trajectory I planned. It just happened I visited my good friend Ako. He encouraged me to apply, and I applied and got it, and I moved. Interestingly, my friend Ako lived in Toronto, but my wife at the time lived in Calgary, which is like the oil capital of Canada. So I went to Calgary. 2 months later, I got a job in the oil producing area called Fort McMurray, which is like the Port Harcourt of Canada. If I was living in Toronto, I wouldn't have applied for the job because Fort McMurray is like a 5 hours flight from Toronto. But because I was living in Calgary, which is just a 1 hour flight from Fort McMurray, I got the job. And that was what saved me. I didn't have to practice law because I was doing supply chain, and it set me up good. I got a house within 4 months of coming to Canada. Because the company I worked for really encouraged us to settle in the city and build houses, so I was so lucky. He explained his life in Canada, which later paid off. But has Kene been a gifted child? Not really, he responded. I'm just determined because when I came to Lagos as a 6-year-old, I really missed my parents. But remembering the fact that I moved to Lagos because I was bright, I was determined to prove them right. In order not to disappoint my parents and my uncle, who nurtured me to be educated, I was determined to succeed. Then, when I did my common entrance, obviously I didn't do primary 6 like most children. My cousin had passed from primary 5, so seeing somebody ahead of you, you are challenged to keep pushing because my cousins were geniuses. When I finished secondary school, I didn't get into university immediately. Then I sat for JAMB again while I was already in IMT Enugu studying business administration. This time I got an admission to study law at Abia State University. But I was enjoying business admin, so I didn't want to go. My uncle worked in Savannah Bank back in the day, and his colleague, a branch manager in Enugu, encouraged me to pursue a degree in law. I yielded to his advice and moved to Abia State University and registered. I was the second to the last person to register before matriculation. I think I registered on Tuesday and the matriculation was on Friday. I would have missed it. When I started studying law, I loved it, and that determination to do well helped me. My family was in Lagos and Onitsha, and I was in Abia State. I had never been to the East before. Since leaving Onitsha and moving to Lagos when I was 6 years old, I have not been back to the East except for school vacations. And having lived in Lagos and the West most of my life, when I moved to Abia State to study, I couldn't really speak Igbo. I had to learn to speak Igbo at Abia State University. Kene found himself in the law field accidentally or by persuasion, but he really wanted to be a farmer. Interestingly, he said, when I was in JSS, I wanted to be a farmer because I liked the soil. I had a school guardian when I was in secondary, and he had a farm. I actually wanted to study agriculture, but I am not into the sciences. To study agriculture, you had to do chemistry, biology, and all that. But I was good at history. I was good at English, literature, so that was the path for me to go. What I was good at determined what I studied. Kene's career path was defined in Canada. He had this to say about how he did it. In Canada, you first do exams called the National Committee on Accreditation. So all internationally trained lawyers had to do those exams to be an equivalent of a Canadian law graduate. It is like doing some university courses to be an equivalent of a law graduate. I was called to the bar already, but I still had to do it. I passed the exams in 2012. After passing the exams, you need to do what they call Articlin, which is like law school. It is a 1-year traineeship or internship. But I was already doing so well in my supply chain field, and I didn't think I needed to do the Articlin. I was already earning 6 figures. Like, why should I go back and start all over again as a junior lawyer and start earning 5 figures? I wasn't humble. I wasn't determined enough. I practiced the supply chain and I did very well. While exploring the corporate world making money, it was later short-lived. Recalling that defining moment in my life, he stated, I got fired from my job in 2015, so I didn't have my 6-figure income anymore. So I then started networking with a few lawyers, and that determination came back again. A lot of people find it hard to get Articlin. If I hadn't been laid off, I wouldn't have gone back to law. And if I hadn't gone back to law, I wouldn't have been here today. So that adage they say, what the enemy meant For evil, God turned for good is very true. I have a lot of mentees and I tell them, do not look at your current situation. Sometime in the future, you are going to look back and say, wow, and thank God I was in that situation. It is good to have obstacles because when you have obstacles and you excel, you will look back and say, God took me through that. But when people excel without obstacles, you get arrogance. You have an ego. You think it is through your own efforts that you did it. You don't realize that a greater force put you through that. Continuing, he said, so I got laid off in 2015. I met with a few lawyers. I met one of my mentors. Her name is Lara Bella. She mentored me and I went into a program for internationally trained lawyers. I did my Articlin in a law firm called DLA Piper, which is an international law firm and also an Imperial Oil, which is the Canadian arm of ExxonMobil. I finished my articles and Lara again mentored me. I got to work in a law firm, one of the biggest law firms in Canada, Blake, Castles and Graydon. I was in Blake's for a year, then went in-house. Because of my supply chain experience, I love business, the business of companies. I tend to like business law, so I went into my current role, which is Parkland Corporation, which is a downstream oil and gas company until I ran for venture position. Blessed with two boys, Kene is a fan of Chelsea Football Club and passionate about mentoring people, particularly internationally trained lawyers. From Lagos, this is Tina Timothy, News Express Nigeria Television.